Bill Campbell,
Oh,
who
yeah.
was a football coach, but then also he coached a lot of the Silicon Valley, from Eric Schmidt at Google to Steve Jobs, and that's why they call him the $1 trillion coach. I was also fortunate to work at Intuit when he was the CEO there. He was a super inspiring, tough, tough love, definitely. He really, knew how to get the best out of people through a lot of questioning and accountability. So the one-on-one meetings with Bill, he was both direct and very personal. Before my first meeting with Bill, somebody thankfully sat me down and said, "So what are your intentions for the meeting, Anne? You need to go into Bill's office with clarity, but also uh, understanding that, yeah, we have problems, but you want to be part of the solution. How do you present that clearly, succinctly, and with energy and that passion?" So that really helped me, set a framework of how I wanted to show up with Bill, because I knew he was going to have high expectations of people working at the company. So that was a career saving sit down for me.
Anne Reilly is a leader whose global career has taken her from Detroit to Hong Kong, Singapore, New York, and now Barcelona. Anne built a reputation in companies like Intuit and Yahoo before pivoting into the world of innovation and change. Today, she helps organizations and leaders reinvent themselves, navigating disruption with clarity and purpose. I'm Carl Tischler from the HPNA Academy, and this is the Better for Having Met Them podcast. Thanks for joining us. Welcome into the podcast, Anne Reilly. Delighted to have you with us. We'll get into the whole backstory of our connectivity and shared interests later on. But Anne, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me here. I'm super excited to chat this morning.
Yeah, likewise. And you are joining us from Barcelona.
I'm in Barcelona. I'm originally from Detroit, but I've lived here about 15 years.
Great. Wow. Well, let's get into that. It's a dynamic and bustling place, Barcelona, and we're likely to get some construction and background on your side.
We might.
Evident of that, but what amazing place, of course. Well, and again, thank you so much for joining us. What we like to start with is we teach in our academy people to think about career. We actually call it career span, just to get people thinking about it more generally. It's kind of like a 60-year block of time, starting roughly, well, let's say when one starts working for the next 60 years. The idea is that it is not correlated to or bounded by when a person can economically retire. It's literally a big block of time. And if we're training people to be a CEO of themselves, then one of their primary responsibilities is to actively navigate and manage that big block of time that we have. What's sort of 13,200 odd days. So what we like to start with on the podcast is we kind of go back to the beginning of your working career, and you mentioned Detroit already. And the origin stories are always fascinating also, but if you can just kind of take us through, that first leg of that journey, that would be great.
Sure. I want to start at Michigan, where I went to University of Michigan, because that's a key point of the story of how I ended up here. But I was at Michigan and looking actually at a study abroad program for a year, and thought, that's a year. That's way too long. I couldn't live abroad for a year. And I ended up going to Paris for a summer study. And that was the first time I traveled on my own. I think I was 19 or so, and ended up in the middle of Paris for 8 weeks. And that was a truly life-changing moment for me, because I met these great people, both Americans on the program and French at the school that I was at, and lived with a French woman. So it really got, it was a fully immersive program, and it just really opened up my eyes to the world out there, really. And I got that bug for travel, but also it really sparked my curiosity.
Mhm.
And I went back and finished up at Michigan and went back to Paris to do a couple internships. And there I also came into contact with the Thunderbird, which is a global management school,
Mhm.
and decided to go to Thunderbird after that. And so I had French as a basis, but I decided to challenge myself at Thunderbird, and I started taking Mandarin Chinese. And that that course actually led me to a career in Asia, to starting my career post master's degree in Asia. And I moved to Hong Kong,
Mhm.
and first was working for a garment manufacturing company, but then went to work at Leo Burnett, where
Mhm.
I was in account management. And I thought, like, oh, this is great. Leo Burnett's based in Chicago. Chicago's a great city, and I'll work here for 2 years, and then I'll transfer back to Chicago. And my first business trip back to Chicago, I walked into the big, beautiful Leo Burnett Tower
Mhm.
and thought, I don't want to work here.
Mhm.
And I was so stimulated by all of the uh, activity, the development, the innovation, the capitalism in Hong Kong, that I really wanted to stay and build out more of my career there.
Mhm.
So I stayed in Hong Kong for 6 years and then moved to Singapore, where I changed sides of the desk. I was on the agency side in Hong Kong, and I moved to the sales side in Singapore, where I worked for Star TV, which was a
Mhm.
satellite TV company covering 53 countries in Asia,
Mhm.
which was then considered a new technology. And I lived there for 2.5 years. And then my husband and I had the opportunity to go to San Francisco. And that actually landed us in the middle of San Francisco at the beginning of the dot-com boom.
Mhm.
And I worked for Intuit and
Mhm.
helped launch one of the first personal finance websites, which is quicken.com. And that was literally designing, showing clients on a napkin, what this website might look like, because all of these websites were new back then.
Mhm.
And, getting their buy-in, getting them to also be courageous and experiment with the internet. So I led a team there for 5 years, and then moved. We continued moving around the globe, and we moved to New York, where I worked for Yahoo,
Mhm.
and worked there for about 5 years, still in the advertising sales side, and then took another leap over the ocean and worked for Yahoo in Europe, where I led the European mid-market team for Yahoo. Uh, this is going step by step. I hope this
No,
is
that's
okay.
okay. Super interesting.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay. And then I worked for a Silicon Valley startup in the travel data space, and I opened up their offices across EMEA and APAC. And I really felt that kind of brought my career together. And because my Asia experience, my US experience, my European experience, and I was thrilled to do that. And and it was in travel, which I loved as well. So post that, a couple years later, I actually hit the wall, and I was in a meeting talking to a client about programmatic advertising, and I thought, this is my last conversation I'm having about this. And I had exhausted my ability to speak about it, and just really needed a change. And that's where I pivoted my career and went into more the innovation and disruption space. And that's where I started studying more about change, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I worked for a company called OpenExo, and that was started by Salim Ismail, who was co-author on a book called Exponential Organizations, and understanding why some companies are growing 10 times faster than others. And through there, I also really started thinking about people and how do people adapt to all this change. And really, when I dove into, really looking at all of the emerging technologies and what it was going to, how it was going to impact us at work, I thought, wow, we're not ready for this. And so how can we become more ready? Because it's here, we're not going back. And how do we get better at navigating all of this change? So that's what I'm working on my own now. And I work with large companies, medium-sized companies, government organizations, and individuals on both understanding how do you navigate change better? How do you bring these frameworks to your company in order to really disrupt yourselves before you get disrupted? And then how do you put that into action and move forward individually and collectively with your company?
Mm-hmm. But just as a general matter, has the world actually gotten objectively, and let's say the business world, that much more disruptive and dynamic than it was 20, 30 years ago?
Yep, definitely. You can see there's different waves of innovation, and we're now in the AI wave. But if you look back at previous waves, they were actually 50, 60 years, and then maybe 40 years and 20 years. But these waves are coming at us faster and faster. And when you think about it, companies used to have time to absorb, think about, and adjust to these waves and incorporate this new technology. But now there's less time. Because the waves are shorter. There's AI is really speeding everything up. I think if you look at even how fast companies are able to reach 1 million users, it took Netflix about 3.5 years to get to 1 million users. It took Threads, I think, 5 days. And it took ChatGPT, a few hours. So things are really speeding up. And even if you look at Accenture's data, they actually they measure 6 different categories of change, from economic to technology and such. And over the last 4 years, there's been 186% change. So things really are getting faster and changing quickly.
Got it. If we go back to that inflection point where you were in the programmatic advertising,
yeah,
I said this is the last time I'm ever going to be in a meeting like that, and you thought about the pivot. Were you thinking about pivoting in different areas or different ways? What was it specifically about? Yeah, the sort of context of the moment that brought you to pivot specifically into innovation, change, and adaptability?
So I really did want a change. I knew I was burning out in this topic, and just losing interest, and just didn't want to do it anymore. And then what I have done at different points in my career when I needed a change is I just start talking to a lot of people. And picking up the phone, making connections. And one of the things that I love to do is ask people, like, tell me about your day, and what do you do? What do you do at work? And what are your main focuses? What are your projects? I even talked to a research scientist, and I said, Sarah, tell me about your day. And she said, well, I go in and I meet with my lab assistant, and we review what happened overnight, and see how many mice we have, and what's the status of each of our mice subjects. And I thought, okay, I didn't want to do that. Didn't want to start my day that way. And but it was a good, I really liked kind of understanding what it means when people go to work. And I've also met people who said to me, I've never actually gone to an office, I've never had an office job.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of blew my mind, like,
Mm.
really? And this person, his family was in restaurants, and then he was an artist, and he's like, I have no idea where all of you people are going with your backpacks and your computers. Like, I don't know what you do when you get there. So it was an interesting exchange of ideas, and also opened up my mind to, like, that there's a lot out there. But somebody actually who was in the exponential organizations community suggested I read the book first, and then if that interested me, then to come back and talk to them. And I was fascinated about the book, partly because Salim had worked at Yahoo running the innovation department, which was not a success. And he points out a lot of the failures in the company and why things happen, but that was actually his inspiration for going out and finding out why other companies were growing 10 times faster than their peer set, and what were they doing differently. And that was actually the what inspired the exponential organizations framework.
Yeah. It's just so essential and interesting to know what bad looks like.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's such a huge advantage to doing that. Like, even with our students, we take a lot of people, have been working 30 odd years because they know what bad looks like.
Yeah.
And it's just massively helpful to be able to do that. So yeah, very interesting to hear about that. And at the human or individual level, when we talk about change and the ability to adapt, where does a person's kind of journey into doing that start? What are the sort of necessary things for a person to either understand or sort of brace themselves for, in terms of just living through a time of dynamic, work and individual change?
Yeah, well, I think the first step in all of this is always awareness. So really understanding what are the changes going on around you. And, if I asked you, hey Carl, what changed yesterday in your life? What changes did you notice? It might not be, maybe yesterday was a happily boring day. But because it's hard for us to see the change day by day.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to step back. We need to do that zoom out exercise and really see what are the changes happening, whether it's, technology, what is AI doing to my industry, my company, my job, and what else is going on? Am I moving jobs? Am I getting a new director? Am I getting new reports? Am I moving vertically? Do I have to go back to the office, 3 days a week or more? What are all these changes that you're dealing with, and really understand, are they going to be a big impact on you, or are they going to just be a little kind of speed bumps along the way that you have to get past? And building that awareness gives you control as well, gives you back some control, because otherwise you're feeling this chaos, or like a tornado coming at you, because some of these changes are things that you're controlling. If you go and get a new job, you're controlling that change, but maybe the company is bringing in a new whole digital transformation program with 17 different phases, and that's being imposed upon you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's more of an uncontrollable change that you have to navigate. So really understanding all of the change is the first step that I talk to people about. Like, let's map out literally the changes happening in your life. And at first, it can be like a bit overwhelming,
Mm-hmm.
but then when you start thinking about like this is actually what normal is today,
Mm-hmm.
and it's only going to get faster as technology also evolves. So do you have a lot of change going on in your life?
I do. I do. But it's yeah, it's good. I mean, I had to. I was not someone who we talked about before, but I didn't embrace change. I hated
Yeah.
change. I liked continuity. I still watch Magnum PI from the 1980s, whatever it is. But yeah, I found it very, very challenging. And that's why sort of why I was asking before about how and whether the world is
Yeah.
accelerated, because I just think in the 1980s or 90s, um, it felt like there was a lot less change, a lot more
Yep.
continuity. And I think that lured a lot of us into
Mm-hmm.
a way of thinking and being that was the norm when it just never has been the norm.
Right.
So yeah, it's very difficult to do that. It's really interesting to hear about your go-to strategy for your changing your own life in terms of speaking with people, etc. One of my kids left school early, and um, she spent a year going around. We used to say from barristers to baristas, right? All kinds of different people, public sector, private sector, etc. And she also would just ask exactly the same question you do, which is just, what do you do every day?
Yeah.
Um, and people were super cool about it
Mm-hmm.
and super open. And she wasn't looking for anything else except that insight,
Right.
like you were.
Yeah.
And people kept offering her, internships and whatever. And she's like, I don't want that. And then just people being people, they take that and say, no, 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 really, come and take this internship. No, no, no. It kind of keeps spiraling
Right.
upwards with her getting
Yeah.
job offers and stuff out of it.
Yeah. Great.
But that central thing
Yeah.
about curiosity, just
Yeah.
absolute, just curiosity and the willingness to stick your neck out a bit and
Yeah.
be vulnerable and just approach people and
Yeah.
say, can you tell me what you do?
Yeah.
It's,
The other thing I really discovered is, I spent a lot of my career in the digital media world, and I thought everybody talked about digital media. I thought it was the center of everybody's world.
right.
And I got out of it, and I was like, oh my God, nobody is talking about this except, this group over here. And it's not a central theme to every executive's day. And really getting out of my silo and my echo chamber was so necessary, to just open up my mind to just other options, other pathways for me.
Right. So a similar phenomenon of getting out of one's silo kind of brings us to the story of how you and I connected.
Mm-hmm.
Although we didn't meet in person at the time, was at the Reinvent Summit that Aidan McCullen and team put together. And I have a lot of respect for Aidan and the work, and I bought a ticket and went to Dublin for the conference to support
Yep.
performing non-assholes doing really cool things. And that was it. I had no expectations or whatever. But I felt like I was sort of like an anthropologist, like
Yeah.
dropped into this world of, I think there were about 500
Yep.
innovation people out there
Mm-hmm.
who I just thought from an external perspective were just incredibly interesting people and engaging people just as a group. And I think so. One of the things, as you were saying about not knowing people not knowing what was happening in the digital marketing world. I mean, I'm aware of innovation at a personal level and at a conceptual level, but I really did find it like really interesting to
Mm-hmm.
hear people talk about innovation as a discipline and to talk about what's happening. And as you were saying about Salim, like what works and what doesn't. So for any of our listeners who are not in the corporate, let's say, innovation space, what would be some of the kind of key things that are happening in the world of innovation that work in the innovation? I mean, what does make companies 10x others on it? How would you sort of just briefly brief them on
Sure.
what's happening in innovation?
Well, I think we all have to be in the innovation space right now because everything is changing, and I really do believe that every company is going to get disrupted and every individual is too. I mean, we're seeing companies create new AI strategies and lay 1,800 to thousands of multiple thousands of people off because those people don't have the skill set that they need for this new AI strategy.
Right.
So I really encourage everybody to talk to the companies that they work for and ask what the AI strategy is, and what are the skills that I'm going to need. How do I upskill or reskill for what the company needs in this new era? But when we also look at innovation in the EXO model, that's really how do you improve your core business,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it's making it maybe you're uh, increasing using AI to increase your customer service, make your customer service better using
Mm-hmm.
chatbots, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But disruption is really how are you changing your business model? How are you going to disrupt your own company before somebody else does?
Mm-hmm.
Because I can pretty much guarantee you that somebody is thinking about how to disrupt your industry and your company. So a good thing a good question we like to ask people when talking about innovation and disruption is, what if tomorrow a new entrant came into the industry and offered uh, the same service or product for
Mm-hmm.
$0? And think about it like, video calls, phone calls are free now. I mean, when I first went to Paris, I had to go to the post office
Right.
and book a time to call my parents for 10 minutes, and it was so expensive I only did it once every 3-4 weeks. And now we have WhatsApp and FaceTime and Signal, so that's essentially free for us.
Mm-hmm.
So what if that happened to your business and somebody came in and the price just declined all the way to zero? How would you make money?
Mm-hmm.
So if it's happening to these big companies like the telcos, it's going to happen across the board. I mean, same with we're taking pictures on our phone all day long, and that replaced film and camera, and Netflix replaced Blockbuster. So these are all things that are happening. So what if somebody else is selling your product for free? What would you do? It's a big question to think about, and really difficult, but that's one that we really like to kind of almost shock people with,
Yeah.
because it will happen.
Yeah, definitely. And just at a human level, as you're saying, those infinite number of 1,800 person or
Yeah.
10,000 person layoffs are massive. One of the challenges that we see a lot with people, again, I would imagine this would lessen over time going forward just because of the disruption. But a big challenge is you have someone who's worked 10, 15, 20, 30 years at a very high level
Yeah.
in a certain job. And the problem that we all fall into is thinking that that is us.
Mm-hmm.
I had an incredibly talented person I used to work with, 15 years in marketing. They were excellent. And they were saying to me, well, I'm a marketing person. Like, well, really? Like, show me your birth certificate, where it says that that's the case. Like, I get it that that's what you've done.
Yeah.
That's where you and your skills have been deployed for this period of time, but you are not a marketing person. And I think when people go through that change, or certainly the people that we work with, first of all, we tend to take it massively personally. We tend to take it out on ourselves and doing a series of things which, on the one hand, are understandable, but they just impair our own personal ability to be able to actually respond to those things. And as you say, definitely it starts with awareness of the situation. This starts with awareness of ourselves, but
Mm-hmm.
there's like this fundamental thing I think about: you are not your job. Like,
Right.
you are bigger than that.
Mm-hmm.
We all have a sort of structural deficit of perspective around those things. And so, yeah, a lot of our work, and again, done in groups and stuff, is to try and restore some of that
Mm-hmm.
perspective and remind you that you were a learner
Yeah.
before. You only got to be outstanding or whatever in this job because you were a beginner and you made
Right.
loads of mistakes. And, you know, anyway, so just ways to refresh that at an individual level, I think,
Yep.
are so important. What are
One
some
of
of the other? Yeah, sorry.
I
Go
was
ahead.
going to say one of the things that we really encourage people to do, because there's very big pressures, especially with public companies, on quarterly and quarterly targets, annual targets, and a lot of people that I talk to just know that something's happening, that there's a lot of change going on, but they're like, I just don't have time, and there's so much pressure
Yeah,
to hit these goals. And we really do need to schedule time on the calendar, and that this is going to be my hour a week, or biweekly, to really go and explore and figure out what's going on in my industry. Who are the new startups coming up, what are the trends, what's going on in the adjacent industries. But you really do need to schedule that time on your calendar as an investment in yourself, in order to put your head up and again zoom out and really be curious about what's happening, because that's when you're going to get smacked in the face with disruption, if you just don't know what's going on around you.
yeah, it's such an interesting observation, interesting kind of broader thing that and I say this as a ADHD, left-handed, hate structure, executive function gap kind of a person. But the thing I found uh, invaluable, and kind of like the main thing that we train people in the academy, is to restore and impose structure,
Mm-hmm.
as you say. And you can't
Yeah.
get anything done with
Yeah.
scheduling. And it always seems, at least the resistance I had to that was, well, things are dynamic,
Yeah.
structure's just going to get in the way, et cetera. But in fact, like, it's the opposite. And the more
Mm-hmm.
disruptive and the more chaotic and dynamic things
Yep.
get, the more important structure, like you're
Yep.
talking about. And yeah, we train people in a weekly check-in on that. That's a lifetime habit.
Right.
Structure is like our best friend,
Yeah.
basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard to. I think I have that as well, and I had to really accept that, and that's a bit of mental flexibility. That the more structure you have, the more freedom and control you'll also have. So making sure that those baseline activities are covered, and that you're paying attention to them weekly, and there's a time on your calendar, frees up this time to go and explore and really see what's happening next, because that's what also companies are looking for. And just as, even if we're running our own business, you want to be, you want to have that visibility, as Rita McGrath at the
Yeah,
conference said. You need to be able to see the signals through the noise. You need to be
yeah,
able to see around the corners. And how are you going to do that if you're just heads down working on the quarter? It's those two don't match.
yeah, yeah. And there is this sort of duration mismatch also. I was speaking with a corporate lawyer recently who was talking about alternative voting structures for public companies, which can be very problematic in lots of other cases. What he was talking about was that the ability at a strategic level to be able to have a bit of time and space to work across time. It's like you, as you said, being focused on having to report quarterly or way more. If you're spending all of your time
Yeah.
reporting, you don't get time for certain key functions that actually just do take time to run their course.
Right.
Yeah, it's another sort of paradox,
Yep.
of this, current world. Yeah, very, very interesting. And so, what are some of the key elements of your work with companies around this, and some of the key challenges that companies find and that you help them navigate through?
Well, I think one of the big things is that companies are trying to figure out what is my AI strategy, and just starting from there, because as one person said the other day, I'm at an AI conference and everything is AI, 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 and I know we need to have a strategy. We're using it, but we don't have a strategy, and frankly, I'm already overwhelmed and don't know how to start.
Mm-hmm.
So where do I even how do I even begin this
Mm-hmm.
process? And so we help with that through this EXO framework, but also really getting back to the human element of all of these transformations, or what is it, like 85% of digital transformations fail to some degree, and it mostly comes down to a people issue, that there's either a lack of clarity, a lack of engagement, a lack of involvement, and people just unwilling to support all of these changes. So, and Gartner actually, their research shows that about 9 years ago, companies had 2 planned changes a year, and now it's up to 14.
Mm-hmm.
So that's more than one significant enterprise change per month, and that's a lot of change to manage within your own job, and servicing clients and things like that. So we really do get down to the individual level of what does it mean to adapt to change,
Mm-hmm.
and how do you do it? What are the skills that you need? How do you understand how you what traits you have that where you naturally react when confronting change? And then also, what's your environment like? Is your environment set up to support change through company support, the team support, the systems, or does it actually inhibit change? And I've worked in both environments, one
Mm-hmm.
that was super supportive, very flexible. They actually gave a lot of us coaches to work through all of this change and acceleration. And I've worked in an environment where it was very hindering. They didn't want our ideas. They shut things down, and it was soul crushing. So the environment that is you're creating, but you're in, can either be thriving or soul crushing. So I think really understanding what type of environment you have is also really important for your own success. And I think that's kind of where HPNA obviously has some roots of working in these environments that were not supportive. Uh, and have you worked in both types and seen a
Yes.
difference in how you show up?
Yeah, definitely yes. And the difference is, well, to be trite, it's night and day
Yeah, yeah,
without any question. It's also as simple as, like, you're either in fight or flight,
yep,
or not. Um, So yeah, I have, and we are super sensitive
Mm-hmm.
to the environments we work in and the people we have
Yep.
around us. Definitely.
Yep. And I would also say that, for companies that are looking to evolve and grow and change, that if they don't have an environment that supports change, the most highly adaptable people that they want as leaders and as catalysts for change will leave because they can't thrive in that
Yeah,
environment.
it's really interesting around the word support, um, because obviously it's a great word, it's a great concept, but I think it needs to be uh, slightly kind of deconstructed in terms of the type of support. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there isn't support that is going to insulate you from the need to change, constantly yourself. There isn't support that means
Yeah.
you have a job for life. Like, it's not that support. Do you know what I mean? It's like we need to really refine and be clear. But I think there are tools. I'm not saying could be coaching, could be whatever that equip you to be able to try and be in the best place, to show up in the best place, to do
Yep.
this current difficult challenge.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's a very tactical and specific type of support.
Yep.
I mention all of that because I think they get easily confused between.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think as you were talking about, one of the things I've seen working in and with startups is if you're really being clear with the people that we have existential risks in this business and threats to it and challenges to it like multiple times a week. And if people really understand that that's the case, and we're living in this thing, just that can make an enormous difference. I think that's almost like a necessary thing. So when we used to hire people into the business, and they would ask me, "Oh, what's the probability of success?" I'd be like, "I don't know, 8%, maybe." And that's optimistic. And these are the 50 reasons why.
Right.
It's not going to be negative, but
Yeah.
you are living in a
Yeah.
super dynamic place. And so making sure that you have people that understand what they're stepping into
Yeah.
and that you as an organization are being as absolutely transparent as you possibly can
Right.
about the moving pieces. I was always surprised by when people can opt in like that, how much uncertainty they can actually
Mm-hmm.
accept and work with, you know, if they're aware of it and they're opting into it.
Right.
Whereas the situation that comes when you hear a lot of those horrible layoffs, et cetera, I mean, they're complex, but you have a lot of people that are just like have been disrupted and haven't been doing the work that you're talking about and to stay up
Yep.
to date on AI, to think of themselves as
Mm-hmm.
constantly needing to evolve themselves. It's like those people find it unfortunately very difficult
Yep.
to adapt.
Yeah, I wouldn't right now rely on luck to help you avoid that. What I call the AI pendulum. That is going to come out and come across and maybe knock you out. It's going to knock you out this time or that time. And if particularly if you're working at a larger organization. So that's why I do encourage people again to ask their manager, ask their CEO, tell us more about the AI strategy, the direction of the company. How are we going to innovate and disrupt ourselves, and what do I need to do to contribute here? And really press your company to help with that skill building, but also don't wait for them,
Yeah.
because you just can't. And I think you should be, there's so many great free courses out, online, from anyone from, Harvard or Google. There's great, I just took a vibe coding masterclass, and that was an amazing eye-opening experience. And it helped me to really get my hands dirty on what is this vibe coding and how could I use it, and how can I also talk to my clients about using it to better visualize projects that they want to work on, not to become a coder, but be able to experience these new tools that are really at our fingertips.
Right. It's so interesting. And at an individual level, we try to get people to be able to do is develop the inner muscle, if I can put it like this
Mm-hmm.
way, to be able to step back from their lives and to look at it like if they were at McKinsey looking in on a
Yeah.
client's thing at a systemic level. And so we have all this massive dynamic change for people in their professional career. We have the problem, like we talked about, of loss of perspective. So whatever's happening there, that is me in my life. But when you step back and look at it and kind of the way I think about it, what I would wish for people to have for themselves, in and amongst all of that, is the first is exactly what you just said, is to just encourage people to be constantly learning something new. Doesn't matter what it is. Do something that's interesting. It doesn't have to be for work. In fact, it's often best if it's not for work, but to just have something, because there is
Right.
just this muscle that we all need to embrace and encourage around just being a beginner and what that's like
Right.
to be a beginner. And I think the second thing is to, we call it like corners of your life, right? To have an area of your life, whether it's an interest or something that is totally 100% not correlated to your work life and to the world, right? You need areas of stability
Mm-hmm.
and interest. And those, I mean, we share a college football team in common that you and I, that we're fans of, or ice hockey, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is, but to have, just to really make sure that you have those elements. It's kind of like you're tending a big garden, right?
Yep.
That is you. And again, I think we talked about also the element of structure around
Yeah.
all of that. I think there are things that people can do structurally to help them be in a position to better navigate these changes. Because just if you were to, we dropped into this conversation from a different planet, and someone said, "Well, you know what? I've got like 15 different major changes in every month I've got to go through. Like that's crazy."
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, anyway. So trying to balance that is, and be mindful of the needs of
Right.
what a client or a person would have to be going through that, I think is such a critical thing, because you and I were talking earlier before the podcast about the amount of energy that's required to go through change. And you see that in the natural world with a chick breaking out of an egg, or a lobster changing shells, or whatever. Like it's just very, very, very energy intensive
Right.
do this. And having worked in the energy sector
Mm.
originally, when I think about AI, I still see it in terms of just the use of electricity
Yeah.
and how it's transforming that, which is another way maybe of just saying that all of these changes that we are in are massively energy intensive on us
Mm-hmm.
as well. And if you're not taking care of yourself,
Yep.
you're not doing that. And I know that's a big piece of your advice in working with people in terms of basic foundational skills for them as
Yep.
individuals.
Yep. Yeah, I really think that, with this change coming at us, and it's going to get faster, it's going to get more complex. It's not going to slow down, and we do need to wake up every day and have that energy to face it, whether they're good, bad, small, big. And as you said, taking care of yourself is the number one thing that you need to do. And there's lots of gadgets, and I've got a Apple Watch and track my steps and this and that. But I think like let's go back to the basics as well.
Mhm.
Are you sleeping well?
Mhm.
Or are you doing that last half hour of scrolling on your phone and missing a half an hour of sleep?
Yes. Yes is
And
the answer to that question. If you're asking me, I would say definitely yes, unfortunately.
yeah. So, how do we put down the phone and get that 8 hours of sleep, if possible? And the way that you can face the day in the morning, think about yourself when you're tired and facing a complex change, or when you've come off a great night's sleep. There's just a massive difference between how you show up because of that energy level and what was repaired, during the night and regenerated. So I talk to people, about that. I track my own, which always needs improvement, my sleep, but also, the exercise. Are you, just skipping your exercise because you've got to do this deliverable for work? It's gonna catch up. You can do that for a little,
Yeah.
but it will catch up to you. And then when you don't have your health, the only thing that is important is your health. So I really do encourage people to think about these, simple, but difficult things to do. I mean, sleep is simple, but it's difficult to really, make sure that you get that 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night, because of all of these other distractions in our life. So how do you prioritize that so you can actually wake up in the morning, look at your scheduled time, and face these challenges and problem solve? I mean, that's what we're doing day in and day out, is just problem solving.
Hmm.
And to have that energy to do that is really, beneficial to get better solutions to your problems.
Hmm. And then when you look back and think about your journeys to date, going all the way back, let's say, to Michigan, and earlier if you like, but who have been some of the key people that have been there at key moments, that have really taught or brought something really important to your life and journey?
Well, certainly, my family's at the core of that, and the family support, the first team support that you experience. And I also, speaking of that, I grew up playing team sports. And I think that really influenced a lot of how I show up at work, because I love teams.
Hmm.
I love, understanding what skills one person has, versus another, who's the fastest person on the court and who's the best shooter and things like that. So that's how you create a winning team, by, understanding what skills people have and how you combine them all. So, just growing up playing team sports had a huge impact on my career and my life. And also, the coaches that I had through that. I mean, it's interesting how we do. You mentioned coaching before, but we grow up, especially if you're doing athletics or you're taking music, or other types of extracurricular classes. How you have coaches during your youth, and then once we become an adult, when we really need it, we stop having coaches. And when you look at the people that are really top high performers, whether they're athletes, whether they're executives, they have coaches, because this is, these things are difficult and you need different perspectives. I'm actually re-listening to the $1 Trillion Coach. I don't know if you've
No.
read that book, but it was about Bill Campbell,
Okay.
who
Yeah.
he was a football coach, but then also he coached a lot of the Silicon Valley, CEOs,
Hmm.
anyone from Eric Schmidt at Google to Steve Jobs, and that's why they call him the $1 Trillion Coach, because he
Right.
had such an impact on all of these companies in the Valley. And he had a unique style. And I was also fortunate to work at Intuit when he was the CEO there. And he was a super inspiring, tough, tough love, definitely. And he really, knew how to get the best out of people through a lot of questioning and accountability. So I'm actually rereading that book because somebody asked. We were talking about coaching the other day. I was talking with a CEO, and I said, one interesting question when you're thinking about your team is, are they coachable? And she was like, what does that mean? And I said, well, are they open to having this feedback? Do they want to take accountability? Do they want this perspective? And somebody really challenging them to be their best self, to show up, to really get to that next level. Do they want that, or do they think that they're the best and they don't need it, that they're at this point in their career and they've got it, they're in control, because that person is probably not going to accept the coaching practice. And I think that's a big blind spot for a lot of people. So
Yeah, I totally agree. That's for us in the academy, that's a major thing that we look for in recruiting and admission,
yep,
is that, and it's an interesting thing because, again, coachability can be very, very different for a
sure,
person in different contexts.
yep,
Um, but
yep,
yeah, so for instance, we refer to it in terms of also like grit on a similar
yep,
way. Like it's a person can have tremendous levels of grit in one area, but if they don't have grit in
yep,
relation to this, similarly, if they're not coachable in relation to this, just
yep,
isn't going to work, no matter how talented or anything else anything else that they have.
yep, yep. Another person that also influenced me was at Intuit as well, and he was my boss there, Brooks Fisher. And what I really learned from him was about clarity, and we talked a little bit about this earlier, but he was able to bring clarity quickly to every situation. I was going to say almost every, but no, every every situation, every problem. And he really did it through great questioning. And we would go, if we had a problem or a challenge that we were struggling with,
Mm-hmm.
we would go and meet with him, and he was able to dissect this, what we thought was a very complex problem, in quite a short amount of time, with this precision questions to unveil information and piece it all together for us. And he did that, and then he also was very clear on our goals, on our strategy, on our roles in it. So I think he really influenced me about how clarity is so important for team performance and for problem solving.
Awesome.
So the one-on-one meetings with Bill were very, he was both direct and very personal. And I think that was an amazing skill and part of his character. But I was, as I said, part of launching Quicken.com and really bringing the internet products into Intuit and into Intuit's customer. It was a big change for Intuit because they were box software, and you bought TurboTax every year, you bought QuickBooks once every 5 years, and Quicken. So to bring the internet products into the company was a big change. So there was a lot going on from people that didn't think that they could ship continuously.
Mhm.
It's a big mindset change from a once a year shipping to a always shipping. And so there were natural struggles within the company. So one of the meetings I had with him was about, what we were doing from the online side of the business and how we were talking to clients about how Intuit was, where we were moving, and how do we come together as teams at the company, with both sides of this business, because it was very, early on. We're talking the, 97 to 2000 or so.
Mhm.
And, he really was about, how do I get this team to be high performing and work together? And again, getting down to the core problems so that he could he could also get better at setting the vision and 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 his expectations of the team. He wanted us certainly to figure it out between us, but he also brought in, like, okay, I will set the vision with this input, but I'm also going to have, high expectations of you because I know you can do it. And that's where this accountability and teamwork come in. I will say that there was somebody before my first meeting with Bill. Somebody thankfully sat me down and said, "So, what are your intentions for the meeting, Anne?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, you need to go into Bill's office and be with clarity, but also uh, understanding that, yeah, we have problems, but you want to be part of the solution. So how are you going to present yourself and your case, that you are working towards the solution, and how do you present that clearly, succinctly, and with energy and that passion. So that really helped me, set a framework of how I wanted to show up with Bill, because I knew he was going to have high expectations of people working at the company. So that was a career saving sit down for me.
Mhm. Great. Um, and we've talked about a couple of things in terms of recommendations for people and takeaways in terms of how to embrace and live with disruption and innovation in their lives. Are there any other pieces of advice either that you've received that have been really helpful to you in your own journey, or other pieces of advice you'd like to just share with people as takeaways?
One of the things, probably stemming from that sit down and being intentional about how you show up, has really stuck with me. And what I do now is I like to ask people to, at the beginning of a workshop or a coaching session, or any interaction, of write down 3 words of how you want to show up. How do you want to show up in your job? How do you want to show up to this offsite? And that's part of being accountable.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at my 3 words. It's on my computer every day, and it's elevate, empower, and energize. And that's how I want to show up in my work. And it really does help remind me of my my responsibility to my clients and my work. And I really think it's a great exercise to do, and you get all sorts of different words that show up.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I guess it's super helpful to have great handwriting like you have. I could write my three and I would not be able to read it. And I'm the only person that can
Yeah.
read my own handwriting. I'm
Yeah.
sure I wouldn't be able to read it.
What do you think your three would be? Or do you have them?
I'm not sure I've had enough caffeine this morning to really focus on
Yeah.
the right,
Caffeine, caffeine, caffeine.
on the right three, but probably uh, caffeine deficient. Let me just give that as a caveat. Yeah, I think there's a thing about being calm
Hmm.
would be one of those three. I think there's a thing about, again, we were talking about it before, but about pausing and being thoughtful. And I think there is definitely a big thing about energy. And I find, I don't know if you uh, do these walk and talk
Hmm.
meetings. I like to. I mean, I find that the more steps I get a day,
Right.
the better, the more clarity I have, etc. I mean, it's literally like you're saying, it's like steps and sleep are the two
Right.
critical things. So I think there's this thing about not just showing up with energy, but showing up with energy that is harnessed and
Hmm.
constructive and reliable. Uh, again,
Yep.
again, kind of a legacy of working in the energy.
Right. Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
all energy is created equal,
Right.
right? So it'd be
Yep.
those three.
Yep. Great.
Yep.
You know, the other thing in terms of advice or learnings, but it also came out at the Reinvention Summit in
Mhm.
Aiden's one of Aiden's presentations about the S curves and jumping from one S curve to the next. I thought that was a really insightful, presentation of it, and I think that that's something that we all need to do in our careers of recognizing your growth and when you need to reskill, upskill, unlearn to get to that next level of growth, and having your eye on that, because again, I think the S curves are um, coming closer together as well.
Yes. So one of the interesting things, similar to what we talked about before, about being a beginner in something
Mm-hmm.
new, is the opportunity and ability to ask questions when you don't
Yep.
understand. And I say that because I think I got through the whole first day of that conference, um, and I was like, I don't know what the hell an S curve is.
Right.
And it was like every single talk, like you're talking about, was all about the S curve. And I was sitting there all day in the first day thinking, what the hell is an S curve and how does it fit together, etc. Anyways, so I finally asked someone, etc. But just you can describe it infinitely better than I can. Can you just tell our listeners who don't know what is the S curve, what is the concept behind it, and how does it
Sure.
work?
It's really about the journey of learning, a new skill or being in a new experience. So you do start off as a beginner and learning, what all of these new things and gaining competency and confidence, and then you have a growth period, and this can also apply to a company, but at some point then you do start leveling off and maybe even declining, and before that decline really sets in, you do need to figure out where is the next opportunity for growth and jump to that next level. And that jumping takes, both a level of awareness, but also, vision of where are we heading. So then you become this beginner again, and the learning, the curiosity comes in, and then the growth spurt again. So it's a constant flow of beginner growth, maturity, decline, and then hopefully jumping to the next S curve
Mhm.
of company or individual growth.
What would be an example of that at a company level? Company's journey of being on one S curve and then jumping to the next. I mean, we talked about Intuit, for instance,
Yep.
doing that from traditional to online.
Yep.
Just within the world of innovation, like, is there a couple of kind of key examples of that people look to or talk about, or that sort of illustrate the S curve and jumping to the next one?
Yeah, I think there's, I think most companies are going through it right now and looking at, how is AI impacting my business? And, as you said, Intuit did it, and they've actually, continued to do it. They're being very strong. So they brought in uh, online with Quicken.com, and then they actually eventually shut that down, and they also sold off Quicken because they didn't see that as the growth trajectory for the future, and now are only focused on QuickBooks and TurboTax, because they found, TurboTax is an annual business, and QuickBooks is this opportunity to really help small to medium sized businesses to take advantage of the internet and be able to, manage their, not only their financial accounts, but end to end commerce with the business. So they did see that their whole history. I mean, Intuit was synonymous with Quicken. Really, Quicken was more, well known than the company name, but they actually let that go and sold it off in order to get to this next curve. And they're doing extremely well, these days, across the board. From a personal experience as well, I think, when I moved from New York with Yahoo in New York to Yahoo in Barcelona, I went, through an S curve, and that's kind of like my most, I think, visible one, because I was at the same company. I was essentially doing the same role. I was a sales leader, but as jumping across the ocean, I had to jump onto a new S curve, because I got to Barcelona, and I was running the mid-market Europe business, so it was a different customer base.
Mm-hmm.
But I had about 50 people, and so a bigger team, and about, I don't know, about 12, 13 different cultures. But the big thing is that I actually didn't speak the language of a lot of the customers. So I didn't speak German, I didn't speak Italian, I couldn't get on a Spanish call then, and I could help the French team, and I could help the UK team in terms of understanding the language. But so I really had to figure out how to be a successful sales leader in the same company, but using different skills. So I needed to also, elevate the team, to upskill the team, and I went back to this. What are the basics of being a great salesperson and a great customer service, client service person, and really connecting the team with, being clear about the mission. What were we trying to accomplish in this business unit, and made everybody feel a part of it. So me taking I had to take a right turn on my management style, because I needed to actually figure out how to empower and upskill this team without being able to be on a sales call with them and know exactly how they were performing. So that's one way that I, as an individual, jumped to my next S curve in sales leadership.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Fascinating. And you and I have been the very fortunate beneficiaries of studying abroad.
Yep.
Right? We're both thousands of miles away from where we've grown up, and we've been here a long time and been fortunate to have the opportunity and chance to live in different parts of the world. And we were speaking before about things you would sort of wish for people. Uh, I do just think it's such a life changing thing if you can possibly do it, uh, to live abroad, to study abroad, just even to travel abroad. This thing about being dropped into a foreign place,
Mm-hmm.
whether I also did one in France like you, or
Mm.
the other side of the world, it's just so immensely beneficial
Right.
to it that when I think back of it, is one of the major formative things for me. Has it also been for you?
Oh, definitely. And I did my study abroad in Paris, internships in Paris, and then I also, when I was at graduate school, I did a summer in Taiwan,
Hmm.
and that was a completely new world to me. Very very different than Paris was in Europe, and again, really just opened up my eyes. And my Mandarin wasn't very good at that point, and but the way that you are able to communicate with people, and once you start laughing with somebody in a foreign country that you're not really speaking the same language, I think just is such a an experience of human connectivity that I just really appreciated, and that I think also continued to ignite my curiosity. And, like many people, I went to Hong Kong thinking I'll be in Hong Kong for 2 years, and then go back. And but then you meet people, and they're like, oh, we're going to Nepal, and we're going to go trekking. And you're like, well, I've never been to Nepal and trekking. I need to add that to my list. And or we're diving in the South China Sea, from leaving from Manila. And then I also got to do experiences at work, particularly in my early career, and have access to executives that I never would have, I think, if I stayed in the US,
Hmm.
and just had these experiences because I was there, and I put myself out there. And hopefully I was performing well at work, and continue to improve, and put myself up for these experiences. And that, I think, was also very energizing for me, that I got to do all these different experiences and learn from people who are also, some Americans, some non-Americans, and you just start learning these different perspectives, which I think strengthened my ability to my mental flexibility, to look at things from different viewpoints. And
Yeah, definitely. That's the fundamental thing.
yeah.
And I remember at different times, just sitting with someone, being a visitor in their country and in their language, and just the fact, as simple as it sounds, that you could have one thing in front of you, like a mug or
Yeah.
something. You call it one thing, they call it another thing, and you're both right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just that as an idea,
Right.
or just that as the that's why even a short trip, I think, can accomplish this.
Mm-hmm.
But you drop into a place. I remember going to Japan the first time
Yeah.
and just being like, "This is just I'm a visitor.
Yeah.
I'm there," and that curiosity and that sense of constructive disruption and being
Mm-hmm.
different. I just think it's like so incredibly good for us
Mm-hmm.
to have. Again, I kind of wish it for everyone to study abroad, which
Yep.
I think kind of has two meanings. I mean, it means
Mm-hmm.
physically to study somewhere else, but it's also the study of
Right.
abroad, of a
Right.
different place, of broadening, yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a great experience.
Yeah.
I have a question for you on the language side. I was speaking with a friend of mine recently about this, about learning different languages. Um, did you find Mandarin easier, more difficult than other languages? And was there a component of that, the sort of visual element of it? Did that have an impact in the way you learned or thought about language?
I will say that the structure of the language teaching at Thunderbird for Mandarin and for Japanese as well was excellent, and it was this process of getting you to speak on day one, on your first class, and we did a lot of dialogues, and we would, we were using tape recorders back then, and we would have our dialogue that we had to practice and rehearse with a partner, and then come into class the next day and perform the dialogue for the teacher. So that was, to me, that experiential learning, that just jump in and start speaking, was an excellent way to learn it. And
Mhm.
French, I think we started with textbooks and learning grammar and not as much speaking. So I think that was very helpful. But the writing and the almost the tones as well, it's so much memorization for the writing. I mean, you can't sound out the characters really. So that recognition and reading and writing is all memorization. So that's when when you go to Asia and see kids just studying, looking at these books of characters or kanji, that they're memorizing what these characters look like, and which we don't face that challenge
Right.
in more Western languages. The thing that I loved about learning Mandarin is that it does not have any tense. So it's I today go to the movies, I yesterday go to movies, I tomorrow go to movies, and which seems the opposite of Spanish, which has lots of exceptions, across the board, or French, where sometimes you are only really appearing to say half the word that's written.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there's some things were easier and some things were a lot more difficult with Mandarin.
Really interesting. Well, if you're interested, my French has no tense either. If you want to use mine, and it's strikingly similar to speaking English and just converting each word
Yes,
in English syntax
right.
into French.
Yeah, well, you live in the present. That's good.
Live in the present. Yeah, it seems to work well. Just to uh, stick with that for a second, um, Thunderbird is such an interesting place. And I
Yeah.
remember coming across it for the first time when I was at JP Morgan. I worked with a woman called Karen Simon, who I think was a grad there. And I remember seeing it and thinking, Thunderbird, like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
And then looking at it, but it just seems such a incredible place, and just a place that's just so focused on the
Hmm.
international perspective of it.
Right.
Was that what brought you there in particular?
Yeah, I did. When I was in Paris doing my internship, I met some grads or some alumni of the school, and I had heard about it, and I met them, and I thought, wow, these people, have interesting, fascinating careers. That whole
Hmm.
thing of like, what do you do? Like,
Hmm.
tell me about your job, tell me about your day. And I really liked the sound of what they were doing. And one of them said to me, if you want to do anything international, go to Thunderbird.
Hmm.
And so I followed his instructions. And at that point, it was an independent school. And it's called Thunderbird because it was set up on the Thunderbird Air Force Field. And it was started by a bunch of ex military, ex Air Force people that came back from World War II and said that we needed to get to know cultures better, and we needed to actually start doing trade with people around the world. And that, if we're doing more trade with them, there will be less need for soldiers. And that was their inspiration. And then it grew from that. And it was, all focused on how can we be better international executives, whether we're coming from the US
Mm-hmm.
or, there was a big program from Norway, from Spain, from South America. And, when I went there was about 1,000 people on campus, all different cultures, all different backgrounds. And being, in the middle of the desert, it was outside of Phoenix. It was, this kind of experiment, of putting all of these people
Yeah.
together. And it was, and still is, quite a beautiful experience and an experiment. It's now owned by ASU, who bought
Mm-hmm.
it a few years ago, which they needed to pivot for sustainability, because Thunderbird was actually the first program, master's program like this, focused on international business. But then more and more came through. INSEAD's a great one, over here in Europe. But I think it's, there's a lot of strength to it now being part of ASU.
Yeah, these global programs are great. A friend of mine just yesterday actually was telling me he's doing the executive MBA at Cambridge. He's just come back from one of their modules in Asia. It's just very, very cool,
Yep.
very cool stuff.
Yep.
And thank you so much for your time, for sharing your wisdom and experience.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you. I really enjoyed our conversation.
likewise. Terrific.